Reflections and Preparation. The members of Team 10 stood before the third Hokage in respectful silence, each bearing traces of the mission's toll. The dim light in the Hokage's office cast long shadows, amplifying the quiet intensity of the moment as Hiruzen regarded each of them in turn. His gaze, sharp and discerning, lingered momentarily on Naruto before shifting to Asuma. Clearing his throat, Asuma stepped forward, his voice steady. "Hokage-sama, the mission in the Land of Waves was completed successfully. We apprehended Gato, secured the safety of the villagers, and ensured their bridge project can proceed without further interference." Hiruzen nodded, his expression unreadable but attentive. "And Zabuza?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of concern. Asuma's face tightened. "We encountered him," he replied. "He attempted to ambush us, but we managed to fend him off. Both he and his accomplice are no longer threats." Hiruzen's eyes settled on Naruto, an unspoken question in his gaze. "No longer threats?" he repeated thoughtfully, his voice mild, though something knowing lay behind it. "How was that accomplished?" Asuma hesitated briefly, his gaze flickering toward Naruto. Naruto acted on instinct. His intervention neutralized the accomplice and ultimately shifted the course of the fight. For a moment, Hiruzen simply observed Naruto, his expression calm and thoughtful. He noted the subtle tension in Naruto's posture, the way his fists were clenched at his sides as if bracing himself. Hiruzen's voice, soft but penetrating, finally broke the silence. "Naruto, it seems you played a pivotal role." Naruto held Hiruzen's gaze, his chin lifting slightly. "I just did what I had to do," he replied, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of restraint. A hint of warmth softened the Hokage's expression. "And you did it well," he said gently. "Remember, you have allies. Strength is valuable, but so too is the trust you place in those around you." Naruto nodded briefly, his expression shifting just slightly in acknowledgement, though he remained largely silent. Beneath his calm facade, he could feel frustration simmering, the weight of unspoken questions pressing on him. Hiruzen turned his attention to Shikamaru and Hinata, his gaze softening. "You both displayed courage and determination. The Land of Waves is not an easy mission, especially for Genin. You should be proud of what you've accomplished." Shikamaru gave a lazy shrug, though a glint of respect shone in his usually indifferent eyes. "It was troublesome, but yeah, I learned a few things," he replied. Hinata bowed slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Hokage-sama. I'm glad I could help." Her gaze flickered briefly to Naruto, a small smile of encouragement on her face. The Hokage nodded approvingly. "It seems all of you have grown through this experience. Take the time to reflect on it. It will serve you well for the challenges ahead." He paused, letting the significance of his words sink in, before addressing the three Genin once more. "Naruto, Shikamaru, Hinata, your mission was no small feat. Take the day to rest and recover. Soon, you will need your strength, for the path ahead will demand much of you." The three of them shared a quiet look, understanding the weight behind the Hokage's words. Shikamaru and Hinata turned to leave, but as they reached the door, Hiruzen's voice sounded again, stopping Naruto in his tracks. "Naruto, if you could remain a moment longer," Hiruzen said, his voice gentle yet firm. Shikamaru cast a quick, curious glance at Naruto before exchanging a look with Hinata. They exited the office, leaving Naruto, Asuma, and the Hokage alone in the quiet room. As the door closed behind Shikamaru and Hinata, Hiruzen's gaze remained fixed on Naruto, his expression softening slightly as he considered the boy before him. He could sense a change in Naruto, a distance that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it lingered in the guarded look Naruto gave him, the slight set of his jaw, the tension held in his shoulders. Hiruzen took a steady breath. "Naruto," he began gently, his voice carrying a quiet weight. "I wanted to speak to you alone because I feel there is something you may have come to understand during this mission. Something that perhaps I should have told you sooner." Naruto's expression hardened slightly, and his eyes grew colder, his gaze unwavering but distant, as if silently waiting for Hiruzen to say what he already suspected. The Hokage continued, his voice tinged with regret. "When you were very young, a powerful chakra was sealed within you, a power that was too dangerous to leave uncontained. He paused, watching Naruto's face carefully for a reaction. I imagine you already know what I'm referring to. Naruto's expression didn't change, but there was a shadow in his eyes, something that was both acceptance and bitterness. You mean the Nine Tails, he said quietly, his tone flat. I felt it during the fight, and I think I've known, somehow, for a while now. Hiruzen nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his decision to keep this truth from Naruto. Yes, the Nine Tails, he confirmed, his voice soft. I realize that not telling you sooner may feel like a betrayal, and for that, Naruto, I apologize. I thought it best to wait until you were ready, but I see now that may have been a mistake. Naruto's jaw tightened, and he looked away for a moment, his eyes flickering with a mix of anger, hurt, and a sadness that he tried to hide. So, you knew this whole time, and you just kept it from me? Hiruzen's gaze was steady, filled with understanding. Yes, and I'm sorry, Naruto. I did what I thought was right, but I understand if you feel that trust has been damaged. My intention was never to mislead you. It was to protect you, to give you a chance to grow up without that weight, for as long as possible. Naruto's hands clenched at his sides, his face expressionless, but his eyes betraying the conflicted emotions swirling inside him. He felt like a stranger in his own skin, knowing what lay within him, knowing it had been hidden from him for so long. Part of him wanted to lash out, to question why Hiruzen hadn't trusted him with the truth sooner. And yet, the other part, the part that had always sought recognition and validation, felt an almost weary acceptance. You know, he said, his voice low and edged with a bitterness he couldn't fully conceal. It would have been nice to know, to hear it from you, instead of figuring it out on my own. The Hokage nodded slowly, taking in Naruto's reaction with the gravity it deserved. You're right, he said quietly. And I know this isn't an easy truth to accept, especially when it was hidden from you. But now that you know, there is another choice I must make, and this time, you will be a part of it. Naruto's gaze flickered back to Hiruzen, guarded but curious. It is essential that you begin training to control this power, Hiruzen continued. With that control, you will be able to wield it responsibly and safely. I believe this training is a path forward, not only to control, but to understanding. The Hokage turned slightly to Asuma, who had remained quiet, observing Naruto with an intensity that held both pride and determination. Asuma, Hiruzen said, a solemnity in his tone. Naruto will need guidance, a teacher who understands what this responsibility entails. Asuma nodded, his gaze shifting to Naruto, his voice calm but resolute. Naruto, you've got a powerful force inside you, one that could easily go out of control without proper training. But you don't have to face that alone, he said, offering Naruto a steady look. I'll be here to help you learn to control it, whatever it takes. We'll tackle this together. Naruto looked between Asuma and the Hokage, his emotions still tangled and raw. The familiar resentment toward the villagers who avoided him now seemed to extend, even if just a little, to the man he'd once trusted unconditionally as his leader. But seeing Asuma's earnest expression and hearing the Hokage's apology, Naruto felt something within him soften, if only a bit, a tentative step towards something like trust. Fine, he replied, his tone cautious but resigned. I'll train, but I need to know you're not going to keep anything else from me. His gaze turned to Hiruzen, a slight edge in his voice. No more secrets. Hiruzen inclined his head, his gaze filled with both respect and humility. You have my word, Naruto. From here on, no more secrets. Naruto's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint in his eye, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. He might not fully trust the Hokage anymore, but he would face the challenges ahead, determined to understand the power within him and, this time, with allies by his side. The morning sunlight cast a warm glow over Training Ground 10, illuminating Naruto, Shikamaru, and Hinata as they waited for Asuma. There was an air of quiet anticipation among them, each wondering what lay ahead after the intensity of their recent mission. When Asuma arrived, his usual relaxed demeanor had given way to a focused, purposeful energy. He studied each of his students for a moment before speaking. All right, Team 10, he began, his voice steady. I have big news for you. You've been chosen to represent Konoha in the upcoming Chunin exams. Naruto's eyes narrowed, a flicker of intensity passing across his face as he absorbed the announcement. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow, letting out a quiet sigh. More work, huh? He muttered, though a hint of interest glinted in his eyes. Hinata stood a little straighter, her hands clasping in front of her as her gaze turned resolute. Asuma continued, looking at each of them. This isn't just any exam. The Chunin exams go back generations and have a deep history, born from a time of conflict between the villages. After the Great Shinobi Wars, the leaders of the 5 major hidden villages agreed to a peace pact, but there was still tension. No village wanted to appear weaker than the others. He paused, letting his words sink in. To prevent the need for full-scale battles, the villages established the Chunin exams. It was a way to resolve disputes, showcase young talent, and maintain a balance of power. Over time, these exams have become a tradition, an opportunity for each village to send its best genin to prove themselves. The exams keep the peace in a sense, but they're also a substitute for war, a competition where young shinobi prove their abilities under real, high-stakes conditions. Naruto's gaze sharpened, a quiet determination in his eyes. He understood now that this wasn't just about rank, it was about Konoha's strength. He remained silent, absorbing every word. As participants, Asuma continued, you're not just going in for yourselves, you're representing Konoha. The strength and skill you show in these exams reflect on our village. You're being given a chance to prove yourselves and earn respect, both from your allies and from rival villages. Shikamaru's expression grew more serious. So, they'll be watching us, judging us, right? He asked, a hint of realization in his voice. Exactly, Asuma replied. Leaders from each village will be there, watching and assessing every move. The exams won't just test your abilities, they'll push you to the limits and beyond, and each stage is designed to test different aspects of what makes a Chunin. Hinata nodded, her expression resolute as she absorbed the significance of representing her village. We'll do our best, Asuma-sensei. Asuma nodded approvingly. Good. Now, let's talk about your training. Each of you has strengths we're going to build on, and areas to refine. The exams demand more than raw power. They require control, strategy, and the ability to work together. He turned to Shikamaru first. Shikamaru, you're the strategist, but in these exams, you'll need to react faster. We'll work on sharpening your decision-making under pressure. You're quick with plans, but sometimes the situation changes faster than expected, and you need to be ready to adapt. Shikamaru sighed, but nodded. All right, Sensei, I get it. More work, but I see why. Asuma turned to Hinata next. Hinata, you have excellent perception with your Byakugan, but the exams are designed to bring out and exploit any hesitation. You'll need confidence, especially under high-stress conditions, so we'll focus on building that. The more you trust your instincts, the better you'll use your Byakugan. Hinata took a breath, a spark of determination in her gaze. Understood, Sensei. I'll do everything I can to be ready. Finally, Asuma turned to Naruto, his expression shifting to one of careful seriousness. Naruto, you've got raw power, but in the exams, power alone won't get you through. You'll need precision, control, and discipline. If you go all out, you'll risk revealing too much. We'll be working on controlling that strength, using just what you need at the right time. Naruto met Asuma's gaze, his own expression impassive but intense. Fine, I'll learn to control it. Asuma nodded, seeing the fire in Naruto's eyes. Good. Over the next few weeks, we're going to train harder than you ever have. We'll tackle everything you need to be ready for the exams. Your individual skills, your teamwork, and your endurance. This isn't just about passing. It's about proving yourselves and making Konoha proud. Naruto, Shikamaru, and Hinata exchanged looks, each feeling the weight of what lay ahead. They were ready to take on the challenge, not just for themselves, but for their village. In the quiet of the Nara forest, Shikamaru stood opposite his father, Shikaku, who looked at him with a rare expression of serious focus. All right, Shikamaru, Shikaku began. You're quick to make plans, but when you're in the field, you won't always have time to think things through. We need to sharpen your instincts so that you can react as fast as you can think. Shikamaru sighed, already dreading the work. Yeah, but how are we supposed to do that? Shikaku raised an eyebrow, his hand forming a half-ram seal. Simple. We're going to train using shadow possession in a way that forces you to think on your feet. This is a different kind of exercise. With that, Shikaku's shadow darted forward, catching Shikamaru's own shadow, effectively locking him in place. Now, break free. Shikamaru furrowed his brow, feeling the familiar pull of his father's technique, and started to channel his chakra, trying to force his shadow free. But each time he thought he'd found a weak point in the technique, Shikaku's shadow adjusted, adapting to his attempts. "Come on, Shikamaru," Shikaku pressed, tightening his hold. "Feel the gaps. Don't just guess where they are. Track my movements and predict them." Shikamaru gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He focused more intently, tuning in to the slight shifts in his father's stance and shadows. Gradually, he felt himself aligning with his father's rhythm, spotting the moments when the technique was at its weakest. "Almost there," Shikaku encouraged, a rare glint of approval in his eyes as Shikamaru managed to push against the shadow binding, breaking free for just a moment before it locked back into place. With each attempt, Shikamaru's reactions grew sharper, his movements more precise. After hours of practice, he finally managed to break free entirely. Stepping out of his father's shadow with a triumphant look, Shikaku gave him a nod. "Good. We'll repeat this until you can break free without hesitation." At the Hyuga compound, Hinata faced her father, Hayashi, in the traditional training hall. Hayashi regarded her with a stern expression, but his eyes held a note of encouragement. "Hinata," he said firmly, "the Chunin exams will demand more than technical skill. You must trust in yourself. Hesitation will be your downfall. Today, we'll train your reaction time and instinct. Activate your Byakugan." Hinata nodded, taking a deep breath as she activated her Byakugan, the veins around her eyes bulging slightly. Her vision expanded, allowing her to see Hayashi's chakra network and every subtle movement he made. Hayashi wasted no time, launching into a series of swift, precise attacks using the gentle fist. Hinata reacted instinctively, moving to block his strikes. The first few attempts left her struggling. Her reactions were a beat too slow, and she absorbed several impacts. "Focus, Hinata," Hayashi urged, his tone commanding. "Don't hesitate. Each movement must be a decision." Taking his advice to heart, Hinata steadied herself and focused fully on his movements. She began to notice the subtle cues, a shift in his stance, a twitch of his wrist, indicating where his next strike would come. Her movements grew sharper, her blocks more fluid, until she was matching his rhythm. "Good," Hayashi said, increasing his speed and changing his attack pattern. "Adapt and anticipate." Hinata's Byakugan tracked every change, her confidence growing with each successful block. After an hour of intense practice, she could block most of his strikes without flinching, her movements smooth and instinctive. For the first time, she felt a surge of confidence. She could hold her own against her father. Hayashi stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Continue practicing until you no longer need to think. You're improving, Hinata. Let that be your strength." In a secluded part of the forest, Naruto waited alone, his expression cool and expectant as he recalled Asuma's instructions about this special training. His thoughts were interrupted by a masked ANBU agent emerging from the shadows. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, but he held his silence. The ANBU agent removed his mask, revealing a calm face with brown hair and a gentle, serious expression. "I'm Yamato," he introduced himself. "Asuma-sensei arranged for me to help you with chakra control, specifically with controlling the chakra inside you." Naruto's expression hardened, but he nodded, staying silent as he sized Yamato up. Yamato formed a series of seals, and suddenly wooden pillars shot up from the ground, creating a framework around them. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Wood release. But despite his curiosity, he didn't ask, keeping his attention on Yamato's instructions. "I'll use my wood release to create a safe zone for the chakra overflow," Yamato explained. "Let's start small. Try to draw out a bit of the Nine-Tails chakra. Focus on controlling it as you bring it to the surface." Naruto clenched his fists, nodding slightly. Closing his eyes, he concentrated on his chakra, reaching deeper within himself, where he felt the fierce, wild energy of the Nine-Tails. Slowly, he tried to pull out a small amount, focusing on keeping it contained. At first, it was manageable, but as he drew more out, the chakra flared, spiking unpredictably. Naruto gritted his teeth, fighting to contain it, but it surged beyond his control. The red burning chakra began to leak out erratically, cracking the wooden pillars around him. "Focus, Naruto!" Yamato's voice was calm, but firm. He reinforced the wooden structures, forming a barrier that absorbed some of the excess chakra. "Don't fight it, guide it." Naruto growled, frustrated but determined. He took a deep breath, easing back on his grip and shifting his approach. He visualized the chakra as a river, letting it flow more naturally rather than trying to force it. Gradually, the energy calmed, becoming more manageable, though Naruto was still visibly straining to control it. After several more attempts, he finally managed to pull a small amount of chakra out without it spiraling out of control. Yamato nodded approvingly, though Naruto's brow was damp with sweat from the effort. "Good," Yamato said. "This is only the beginning. Over time, we'll increase the intensity and teach you to control it without the pillars. But for now, this is a strong start." Naruto nodded, his expression stoic, but his eyes alight with determination. He hadn't fully mastered the power yet, but he was closer than he had been before. He was ready to put in the work, no matter how difficult it was. Naruto walked through the late afternoon streets of Konoha, the weight of his recent training session with Yamato still fresh in his mind. The village was winding down, villagers finishing up their day's work, and Naruto found himself enjoying the quiet, letting his thoughts settle after hours of intense focus. But as he neared a narrow side street, the faint sound of a struggle reached his ears. Small grunts, muffled protests, and the scuff of shoes against stone. Naruto's instincts sharpened instantly, and he turned down the alley, his eyes scanning the scene ahead. Just a few yards away, he saw Konohamaru suspended off the ground, his scarf twisted in the grip of an unfamiliar shinobi. The boy's feet dangled, kicking uselessly as he struggled to free himself from the tall, painted stranger, who had a large, ominous-looking puppet strapped to his back. The shinobi smirked down at Konohamaru, clearly enjoying his control over the frightened boy. Naruto's gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight. The tension in his posture grew, a quiet intensity settling over him as he watched Konohamaru's distress. Without a word, Naruto took a step forward, his expression calm but edged with a cold determination. He moved closer, his silent approach unnoticed by the stranger, but his presence unmistakable as he readied himself to intervene. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you in the next one.